Good morning, I'm Leandra the TBR0, and today we're going to go through my annual spreads for my 2025 reading journal. Let's do it. Today we are going to go through my annual spreads for my 2025 reading journal. For those of you who are new, this is going to be new for you. What can I say? For those of you who have been here for quite some time with me, you will notice some significant changes. This is my 4th year doing a bullet journal, but it's my 1st year with this particular company, Papier or Papier. I'm not sure how they pronounce it. Typically I have much larger, I think they're A3 journals, but this year I decided to do an A5, and that means I just have less space on the page. I've also switched up what I'm using as far as my other materials. I'm trying Primrosia. It's similar to the bookmarks that I was using before, which were mild liner, and they definitely still have the 2 sides. So I've got a thinner, finer edge, and then on the other side we have one that is thicker for larger canvas and for more material as far as if I wanted to spread that color further. And then I also ended up just buying a bunch of swatches of different paper because I liked the idea of adding some texture, a bit of 3D action. And also with that paper, I bought washi tape. Do I know what I'm doing with it? Absolutely not. I have no idea how people use it, and I am going to ask you guys to give me some tips. Those of you who have bullet journals and you do use additional materials, please help a beginner out, because really all I tend to use for the past 3 years have been a simple bullet journal, my set of mild liner markers, and the ruler that cost me 49 cents when I originally bought it. So I am using a lot more materials than I typically do, so any comments of criticism, of suggestions would be really appreciated. And here is my cover page. I'm really proud of it. You can see that I did some planning beforehand. I was trying to figure out how exactly I could use the paper, how I could take advantage of the different textures that came from the patterns, and I also have included a quote that I just really loved. It's actually a dedication from Agatha Christie's The Secret Adversary, the first book in the Tommy and Tuppence series, and it's really lovely, and I'll make sure to read it aloud to you guys. To all those who lead monotonous lives in the hope that they may experience at second hand the delights and dangers of adventure. If you haven't read that book, I highly recommend it. That's my really old copy. Like, the cover was already ripped off when I first got it, and so I don't feel as badly taking the dedication page from that. And I'm honestly going to keep the book for future uses whenever I do want simply a little bit of text that may or may not apply to the bullet journal itself, but I think it just adds a little bit more charm. And then we have my 2025 goals. I have actually revamped it this year. Instead of just setting off goals for the next 12 months, I realized, what am I doing? Why don't I just do the first 6 months, reevaluate my situation, and then see if my goals change? I feel like that makes sense, and I don't know why it took me so long to actually put that into commission. Then we have my 25 and 2025. Just like last year, I don't typically end up making a list of just titles that I own or titles I want to read. Instead, I actually break it down by genre or type of book, and so those sectioned off pieces, I ended up doing it very cleanly by 5s, because 25 is just a really nice number to do that in, and probably every 5 I will change what the ruling has to be as far as a book counting for my 25 and 2025. I definitely want it to be books that are from my shelves. That is always going to be a goal for mine, and you can see I messed up. Look how janky that 5 was, but it's okay. When you color it in, you don't even notice. This is something that I think a lot of beginners to bullet journaling don't realize is more often than not, you can fix your mistake, or at least make it not super noticeable, so it looks like it was always meant to be that way. So I ended up just coloring in my 2025, and it doesn't necessarily look like I did this on accident, right? It kind of looks like I did it on purpose. I'm coloring in the 25. I'm going to be decorating it with flora, and it's going to end up looking nice in the end, as you saw with those end results. But you do see that I've broken it up by 1 through 5, 6 through 10, 11 through 15, and I will probably be using categories such as genres or maybe even age categories, which I did last year. For instance, my categories last year included modern mystery, classic mystery, nonfiction, middle grade, and I think just a general fiction section. So anything that I read from my TBR, I could just put in that. So that, honestly, I think I just named 5 categories. I might just reuse them for this year, but you won't see me actually fill it out because I'm allowing myself to just think about it, and that's pretty much what this bullet journal is at the moment. It's just a shell of my annual spreads, so then I can think about how I actually want to use these pages and what information I do want to log when the time comes. I ended up putting my markers on first as far as the color before outlining with my black marker. And the reason for that is because I knew that if I did the black marker first, having the outline of the boxes and then tried to color it in, there was more chance of the color bleeding, mixing with the black, looking a bit dingy. So you can see that I'm learning as I do this, actually, because I didn't do that originally with my 25 in 2025, for instance. So I am kind of figuring things out as I go. I also am not doing any stencils. I'm not using pencil before I go for my drawings. I'm not really practicing before I do it, and that works for me. It does not work for everyone. If you are someone who really can't help making mistakes and you're a bit of a perfectionist, then I highly recommend you use pencil before you actually, start using the permanent marker. Then on the right hand side, I ended up creating a nice place to list my advanced reader copies. I'm really only going to list them when I read them, because if I write them down ahead of time and then I just don't read them, it ends up looking like an undone page. I also realized some glue was still on that page. Whoops. Oh well. And this one is going to show how I created my purchased books spread. Now, what is that? Again, many of you who have been a part of my channel for quite some time, you'll know exactly what I'm logging. For those of you who are new, the purpose of this is because in 2024, so this year was the first time I decided to really do this and pay attention to it. I made the goal of trying to read every single book that I have purchased in 2024. It could be a book published in 2024, a book published in 1994. It doesn't really matter. If I bought it this year, then I need to read it. And I just thought that could be a really interesting challenge, and I'm doing pretty well. Every 3 months on my channel, I've been giving an update showing how plausible this goal is. Am I closer or farther away from actually achieving it? And as of right now, I have just under 20 books that I need to read before 2024 ends for me to actually achieve the goal. I don't know if I'm going to, but I'm really close. And I think that in itself proves that this goal has really worked for me, because in past years, I have been nowhere near that number. I don't even want to talk about how many books I've read that I haven't read that I bought in previous years. Then I ended up doing my DNF graveyard and DNF statistics spread. So last year, I saw a bunch of people creating a DNF graveyard where they create little gravestones, and every time they DNF a book, they add it to the graveyard. And I really loved that. I thought that was really aesthetically pleasing, and I ended up just not pulling the trigger and actually designing it, partially because I want more statistics about my DNFs. That's one thing that I'm trying to improve moving forward, is actually trying to see why I DNF a book. Why did it just not appeal to me? Was it the author? Was it the genre? When did I DNF it? Those types of categories that really help me be better at choosing books that I want to read and also finishing books that I really enjoy. So I decided to create a 2-page spread. The left-hand side is my DNF graveyard, so I'm going to have all the gravestones. It's going to be very fun. And then on the right-hand side, I will actually be documenting the title and probably the format. Did I DNF an audiobook, an ebook, physical book? And then also, when did I DNF it? Was it after the first chapter, or had I got pretty far into it before I finally called it quits? Here you can see me trying to finagle and figure out what is actually going to be the most aesthetically pleasing setup. And I even ended up flipping the one page over because I liked the fact that we had two very different designs with the stripes and the kind of wall, like old, I don't know, 1970s or 1980s wallpaper feel, it was pretty aesthetically pleasing for me, because I like fighting against patterns almost, like putting two patterns you wouldn't expect together. It works out. Now here's where I'm really struggling with my washi tape. You guys are gonna have to help me. How do you keep it down? Is this just like bad washi tape? Because that page still gives me trouble, and I think you might have noticed on the other flip through that it's kind of poking out a little bit, and I'm just like, stay down, goodness gracious. So washi tape is something I'm gonna have to work on, and maybe I just have to buy less cheap washi tape. That's probably the solution. This is something I tend to do as I move sections, so I did end up creating another kind of just basic title spread that showed I was moving from, generic goals and tracking books I didn't finish, tracking books I bought, and the second section is going to be focused on the books that I've read, so finished books. So I think that's probably the better way to describe it, is that the first section of my annual spreads is simply collecting data about books, whether I've read them or not, and now we're moving on to tracking books that I've actually read. What do I want to know about those books that I have finished? And I didn't mean for this to happen, but I really like the idea of it being chapter 1 and showing that, all right, here's the beginning. It worked out really well, and I might continue that thread as we move forward, and maybe I'll end up, I feel bad saying ripping out, but I probably will rip out the first page of each chapter as I move forward, because I think that's really aesthetically pleasing and a great way to break up my bullet journal. It's kind of a dedication to The Secret Adversary unintentionally. It just worked out that way, but I do like that because it's a very comfy Agatha Christie. At the moment, I am very slowly and methodically trying to design my boxes, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to have this grid, and every single time I finish a book, I will fill out, color in one of those squares. You will see that I pull up my bullet journal from last year and how I ended up doing it, and these ones are very tiny boxes because I have realized I've become a very voracious reader. At this point, I have already read over 200 books this year, and we still have about a month and a half left. So, oh boy. You can see my finger is circling that one section of chapter 1 or circling the right-hand side, and it's because I'm thinking about stenciling out an armchair. So every single year, since I started my bullet journal journey, I have designed an armchair, and it's always on my books read page, and I'm really proud of the one I did last year. Here, this is what you can see. It's very colorful, and I have my book cards, and that's actually a pretty close similarity to my current reading chair, and I was like, I would really love to bring that back. I just don't know where I want to put it. I don't know if I want to cover up chapter 1, like draw on that page, or if I want to do it on the right hand side, but then that takes away space for logging books, because we know that I can read up to 200 and I've only made enough squares for 100. Then you can see that I am wanting to track an additional statistic. So last year and the year before that, I tracked new to me authors, but because I'm getting better about reading repeat authors, so authors I've read before, I want to track both of those. I've also realized I've skipped a page, and that is my publication year bar graph. I know it looks really plain, but once you start filling it out, it starts to look really nice. See, this is what mine looks like to date, and it's really cool to see the years that I just seem to be gravitating towards, and they are more recent years actually, so 2024, 2022, 2023. In fact, I had to create a second bar line for 2024 just because I've been reading so many new releases this year. I don't know what's gotten into me, but I loved that, so I wanted to bring it back. And I've decided to create a genres bar graph just because it worked out so well, and I really liked tracking it in that way. I didn't like the way I was doing my genre tracking before, just because it was a bit confusing. I realized I should really be tracking genre blends as well, and I'm also showing how I used to track series. So I had two sections, series that I just started and then series that I'm continuing, and I just didn't have enough space. So I've created 2 different pages, one for new series started and then one for series continued. And then we have another section break in which I defile the secret adversary one more time. And I really loved that one section where Tommy and Tuppence are just complaining about the fact that they're these young adventurers who just don't have any money. Like, what the heck? It's so hard to have money. And I was like, I can very much relate to that. And what's really great about it is following that one spread. I'm designing it right now, but after it, I end up talking about my acquired format. So how am I acquiring my books? How am I reading my books? And I thought it was quite fitting. And here is just another example of how I'm brainstorming before I actually put anything to page. So that ended up looking really nice, this layering. And so I decided to do that at the top, but I also end up doing it at the bottom as well. And I was like, okay, I like that, but I don't know if I like the 2 patterns together. It might be too busy. And then we hit on the money with the polka dots. So I was like, okay, yep, that's what we're gonna do. I added some flower stickers, and yeah, just trying to clean it up and make it look quite nice. And then I underlined the quote that I really love from that one page saying, money, money, money. And I'm like, girl, same. And as I promised, the next spread is my acquisition methods. This ended up being such a fascinating thing to track, especially because I want to keep track of the books I've purchased and read, as well as the books that I'm reading from my TBR backlist, that I'm borrowing from the library, that I'm getting as gifts from friends and family. I also tracked my rereads and my ARCs and gifted copies from publishers. So I don't know if I'm going to do it in the same way, but I definitely want to track these statistics again. I want to track that data again. So here we are. And then I'm also tracking my reading formats. You can tell that I'm giving more space to this data as well, partially because if you remember at the beginning of this video, I said that this is a much smaller bullet journal than I've ever had before. So now I'm giving a full page spread rather than a half page spread for that. And then I have a nice cover page for my monthly statistics because the next page will be completely filled with the graph that I created because there's too much that I actually need to calculate there. As you can see, for instance, I am tracking quite a bit in that top layer. So the number of books I've read per month, what age category it is a part of, and then 1 through 5 star ratings, plus my average star ratings. And you can see here that I actually did have one thing that I removed, which was my number of DNFs per month. I don't feel like I need to do that because I'll be tracking that in other pages. I realized that sometimes I just repeat information. I don't need to track it in multiple places. And then I'm also keeping track of my physical TBR, and I've actually created a nice little graph at the bottom there, plus my head-to-head, where I end up pretty much choosing my favorite book per month, and then I just have them face off. And we decide what's, my quote-unquote best book of the year. And, things are shaping up this year. I am actually really excited to see what ends up being my top book of the year for that. And then we have my Battle of the Booktubers Championship Round. For those of you who have no idea what this is, I will have it linked below, but I am very fortunate to be one of the champions from this year's competition, and that means in 2025, I'm going to be in the championship round. I'm very nervous, I'm very excited, and I've made sure to provide 2 blank spaces to a 2-page spread for whatever ends up happening with that championship. I wanted to make sure I had it there before I started, January statistics. So there we are. This is my annual spreads. Nothing too much to sneeze at, but I am really happy with it, and I'm excited. I'm just so excited to see what my reading year brings because 2024 has been amazing. I can't imagine that 2025 is going to beat it, but you know what? We can try. Please be sure to comment below, consider subscribing. Just, let me know how you're doing today, and thanks for being here. I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye!